$2. Richard Hartwell slammed his hand on the hood of his Tesla, his laughter echoing through the Virginia mountains like thunder. That's what you're worth, Elena. That's what my brother's marriage to you was worth? $2 pathetic. Elena? Hartwell stood motionless, her 8-month-old daughter crying in her arms, her 8-year-old son pressing against her leg. Behind her sat a rotting wooden shack with broken windows and a collapsed porch. Before her stood her late husband's family, their luxury cars gleaming, their faces twisted with cruel amusement. She had crossed the country believing she would find hope. Instead, she found herself staring at the cruelest joke of her life. But what Richard Hartwell didn't know, what none of them knew, was that beneath the floorboards of that $2 shack lay a secret worth $85 million. Before we continue, I want to invite you to subscribe to my channel and follow this incredible story to the very end. Drop a comment telling me which city you're watching from so I can see how far this story has traveled. Now let's go back to the beginning. The phone call came on a Tuesday morning, 3 weeks after Elena buried her husband. She was sitting at the kitchen table of their small apartment in San Francisco, staring at a stack of bills she couldn't pay. The rent was due in 5 days. The credit card companies had started calling. She had already sold her wedding ring, her car, and most of the furniture. All that remained was enough money to feed her children for another month, maybe 2 if she stretched it. When her phone rang, she almost didn't answer. Another debt collector, probably. Another voice demanding money she didn't have. But the number was from Virginia, and something made her pick up. Mrs. Hartwell, this is Thomas Green, attorney for the estate of Harold Hartwell. I'm calling regarding your inheritance. Elena's heart stopped. Harold Hartwell was Daniel's grandfather, the patriarch of the Hartwell family. She had met him exactly once at her wedding, where he had looked at her with something that might have been kindness before his children whisked him away. My inheritance, she repeated. I don't understand. Daniel never mentioned... Yes, well, Mr. Hartwell was quite specific in his will. He left a property in Virginia to you and your children. The transfer has been completed, and I'm calling to inform you that you may take possession at your convenience. Elena's hands began to shake. A property in Virginia? Maybe it was a house, maybe it was land she could sell. Maybe, just maybe, it was enough to start over. What kind of property, she asked. There was a pause on the line, a pause that looking back should have warned her. It's a cabin, Mrs. Hartwell, a small cabin in the Blue Ridge Mountains. The deed has been transferred to your name for the sum of $2. $2? That's correct. It's a symbolic amount for legal purposes. The property itself is rustic, but it's yours. Rustic. Elena clung to that word like a lifeline. Rustic could mean charming. Rustic could mean potential. Rustic could mean a place to rebuild. She used the last of her savings to buy 3 plane tickets to Virginia. It was the biggest mistake of her life, or so she thought. The flight from San Francisco to Richmond took 5 hours. Elena spent most of it staring out the window, watching the country pass beneath her. Mason sat beside her reading a book about American history. Baby Lily slept in the carrier on Elena's lap, blissfully unaware of the uncertainty surrounding them. Mom? Mason looked up from his book. Are we going to live in Virginia forever? Elena hesitated. She wanted to say yes, wanted to promise him stability and security and all the things a child deserved. But she had learned in 6 months of widowhood that promises were dangerous things. I don't know yet, sweetheart. We're going to see the house first. Then we'll figure out our next steps. Dad always talked about Virginia, Mason said quietly. He said his family had been there for a long time, like hundreds of years. Did he? Elena hadn't known that. There was so much about Daniel's past that remained a mystery even after 5 years of marriage. He had rarely spoken about his family, and when he did, his face would close like a door slamming shut. They're not good people, he had told her once. My brothers, my sister. They care about one thing, money, and they'll destroy anyone who gets in their way. Elena had thought he was exaggerating. She had thought surely no family could be that bad. She was about to find out how wrong she was. The rental car was the cheapest model available, a compact sedan that groaned on the mountain roads. Elena followed the GPS directions deeper and deeper into the Blue Ridge Mountains, watching as the highway gave way to country roads, then to gravel, then to dirt tracks that barely qualified as roads at all. Are we lost? Mason asked, his voice uncertain. The GPS says we're almost there. But almost there looked like nowhere. The trees pressed close on either side, their branches scraping the car like skeletal fingers. The road wound upward, growing narrower with every turn. Elena hadn't seen another vehicle in 20 minutes. Then she came around a bend and had to slam on the brakes. 3 luxury cars were parked across the road, blocking her path. A helicopter sat in a clearing to the right, its rotors still, and standing in front of the cars, arms crossed. Faces smug were the Hartwells. Elena's stomach dropped. She recognized them from Daniel's descriptions from the few photographs he had kept hidden in a drawer. Richard, the oldest, with his expensive suit and cold eyes. Victoria, the sister, dripping with jewelry and contempt. Marcus, the youngest, hanging back slightly, his expression unreadable. Elena had never met them in person. Daniel had made sure of that. Now she understood why. She stepped out of the car, slowly lifting Lily from her carrier and reaching back to take Mason's hand. Her son pressed close to her, sensing danger in the way children always do. Well, well, well. Richard stepped forward, his Rolex glinting in the afternoon sun. The gold digger finally arrives. Elena flinched but said nothing. Oh, don't look so surprised, Elena. Victoria's voice was honey laced with poison. We know exactly what you are. A nurse who saw a chance to marry into money and took it. Too bad for you, Daniel was the black sheep of the family. He had nothing, and now neither do you. I don't want your money, Elena said quietly. I'm just here to see the property Mr. Hartwell left me. Chickeny! Richard threw his head back and laughed. The sound was loud, ugly, bouncing off the mountains like an assault. The property? Oh, this is precious. Did you hear that everyone? She's here to see the property. The other Hartwells joined in the laughter. Even the lawyers standing behind them allowed themselves thin smiles. Elena felt her face burn with humiliation, but she stood her ground. She had survived foster care. She had survived nursing school while working 2 jobs. She had survived her husband's death. She would survive this. Where is it? She asked. Richard's eyes glittered with malicious delight. Right this way, Your Majesty. Let me escort you to your palace. He turned and walked up a narrow path, his Italian loafers squelching in the mud. Elena followed Mason's hand tight in hers, her heart pounding with every step. They walked for perhaps 200 yards before the trees opened into a small clearing. And there it was. The shack. It was worse than anything Elena had imagined. The roof sagged in the middle, covered with moss and holes. The windows were broken, stuffed with newspaper and plastic bags. The porch had collapsed entirely on one side, leaving rotted boards jutting out like broken bones. The door hung from one hinge, creaking in the wind. Elena stared at it, unable to speak. Behind her, the Hartwells erupted in fresh laughter. $2, Richard shouted. That's what grandfather thought you were worth. $2 for 2 rooms of pure luxury. Victoria raised her phone, recording the moment. This is going to get so many views. The gold digger and her $1 million inheritance. Marcus said nothing, but he didn't laugh either. He stood apart from his siblings, his face troubled, his eyes darting between Elena and the shack. Mason tugged at Elena's hand. His voice was small, confused. Mama, is this where we're going to live? The question broke something inside her. Elena felt her eyes fill with tears, felt her throat close with grief and rage and despair. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. She wanted to wake up from this nightmare and find herself back in San Francisco, back in the life that had been hard, but at least had been hers. But she couldn't run. She had nowhere to go. She had spent everything to get here. This shack was all she had. Yes, she heard herself say. This is where we're going to live. The laughter stopped. Richard stared at her, his smile faltering. He had expected her to cry. He had expected her to beg. He had expected her to give up. He hadn't expected acceptance. You're joking, Victoria said. I'm not. You can't actually be planning to stay in that hovel. Elena turned to face them, her children behind her, her spine straight, despite the tears still wet on her cheeks. It's my property. I'll do what I want with it. Richard's expression hardened. Fine. Stay in your shack. Freeze to death for all I care. The utilities should be connected by tomorrow. Consider it our housewarming gift. He paused, savoring the moment. Grandfather always said you were stubborn. He said it was the one thing he liked about you. But stubbornness won't put food on the table, Elena. Stubbornness won't keep those children warm. He turned and walked back toward the cars. Victoria followed, still recording on her phone. The lawyers gathered their briefcases and hurried after them. Only Marcus lingered. He stood at the edge of the clearing, his hands shoved in his pockets, his face twisted with something that might have been guilt. I'm sorry, he said quietly. This isn't right. What they're doing. It isn't right. Elena looked at him. Daniel had said Marcus was the weakest of the siblings, the one who went along with whatever Richard and Victoria wanted. But weakness wasn't the same as evil. Then why don't you stop them? She asked. Marcus flinched. You don't understand. Richard controls everything. The money, the lawyers, the family. If I go against him, then you're just as bad as they are." The words hit him like a slap. Marcus's face crumpled, and for a moment Elena saw the boy he must have been before wealth and family politics twisted him into whatever he was now. "Marcus," Richard's voice echoed from the road. "We're leaving." Marcus looked at Elena one last time. "There's more to this than you know," he said. "Grandfather wasn't just being cruel. He had a reason for leaving you this place, a reason Richard doesn't want you to find out." "What reason?" "I don't know, but if I were you, I'd look carefully, very carefully, at everything." Then he turned and hurried after his siblings, leaving Elena alone with her children in front of a shack that was supposed to be her inheritance. The convoy of luxury cars disappeared down the mountain. The helicopter lifted off its rotors, beating the air like a war drum. Within minutes, the Hartwells were gone, leaving only silence and the sound of the wind through the trees. Elena stood motionless for a long time. Then Mason tugged at her hand again. "Mama, can we go inside?" Elena looked down at her son. His face was pale, scared, but also determined. He was trying to be brave. For her. "Yes," she said. "Let's go inside." The door groaned when she pushed it open, the rusted hinges screaming in protest. The smell hit her first musty and damp and old. Then her eyes adjusted to the dim interior, and she saw what remained of her inheritance. One large room with a massive stone fireplace. One smaller room in the back that might have been a bedroom. Dust everywhere thick as carpet. Cobwebs hanging from every corner. Mouse droppings scattered across the floor. But the roof, despite its holes, seemed to keep out most of the weather. The walls, despite their gaps, blocked most of the wind. And the fireplace, despite the debris inside it, looked solid. "It's like a pioneer house," Mason said, running his hand along the wooden wall. "Like in my history book." Elena forced a smile. "That's exactly what it is." "Can we explore?" "Stay where I can see you." Mason moved through the space carefully, his natural curiosity slowly overriding his fear. He found a back door that led to a shed, a pump that still worked, a stack of firewood that was somehow dry. "Mama, there's water. I can get us water." "Don't drink it yet," Elena warned. "We need to boil it first." She set Lily's carrier on the floor and began to assess their situation. No electricity, but the lawyer had said it would be connected tomorrow. No running water inside, but the pump worked. No furniture, but they had sleeping bags in the car. No food, but she had packed granola bars and crackers for the journey. They could survive tonight. One night. Then she would figure out the rest. As Elena began to sweep away the worst of the dust, something caught her eye. The floorboards in the center of the room. They were different from the others. Newer. The wood was lighter, the seams tighter, as if someone had pulled up the original boards and replaced them with fresh ones. Elena stopped sweeping. Daniel's brother Marcus had said something before he left. Look carefully at everything. She knelt down, running her fingers along the edge of the newer boards. The dust here was thinner, as if the boards had been disturbed recently, maybe within the last few years. "Mason, did you find anything in the shed?" "A bunch of old tools, and there's a crowbar." "Bring me the crowbar." Her son appeared a moment later, dragging the rusted tool behind him. Elena took it, weighing it in her hand. This was crazy. She was exhausted, heartbroken, probably not thinking straight. The floorboards were probably just a repair job, some previous owner patching a hole. But Marcus's words echoed in her mind. "There's more to this than you know. Mason, take your sister outside. Wait for me on that big rock by the shed." "But Mom, please, sweetheart, just do as I ask." Her son's eyes widened, but he didn't argue. He picked up Lily's carrier and carried it carefully outside, leaving Elena alone in the dim interior of the shack. She wedged the crowbar between two of the newer boards. The wood resisted. Elena threw her weight against the bar, feeling her muscles strain, hearing the nails shriek as they pulled free. One board came loose. Then another. Then a third. And beneath them, where there should have been dirt or stone, or the solid foundation of a building, there was only darkness. And stairs. Stone stairs descending into the earth. Elena's breath caught in her throat. Her heart hammered so hard she could feel it in her temples. This was impossible. This was insane. There was a staircase hidden beneath the floorboards of a $2 shack in the middle of the Virginia mountains, and she was the only one who knew about it. She grabbed her flashlight and descended. The stairs were worn smooth by centuries of use, dipping in the middle, where countless feet had walked. The walls were rough stone, damp with moisture. The air grew colder as she went deeper, but also fresher. 17 steps. She counted them automatically. At the bottom, the staircase opened into a chamber that stole her breath. It was a vault. A medieval-looking vault with arched ceilings and stone walls and iron brackets for torches. The space was circular, perhaps 30 feet across, with alcoves carved into the walls. And everywhere she saw the same symbol, a raven, clutching a crown in its talons. Elena moved through the chamber in a daze. The symbol was carved into the stone, woven into rotted tapestries, embossed on a shield above a doorway that had been sealed with rubble. She had seen this symbol before. Yesterday, driving through the valley. On the gates of a massive mansion in the distance. In the center of the vault sat a chest. Dark wood, silver bindings, ornate carvings. Unlike everything else in the chamber, it wasn't covered in dust. Someone had been here recently. Elena approached the chest slowly. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely lift the lid. Inside, wrapped in leather that had protected them from time and moisture, she found documents. Stacks of them. Old documents on thick paper with official seals and signatures. And on top of the stack, a white envelope. Her name was written on it in familiar handwriting. Daniel's handwriting. Elena sat down hard on the cold stone floor. She couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Her dead husband had stood in this vault and left her a message. With trembling hands, she opened the envelope. "My darling Elena, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and my family has given you what they think is worthless. They're wrong. Everything you need to know is in this vault. These documents prove that our children, Mason and Lily, are the direct descendants of the Blackwood family, the original owners of Blackwood Manor. The estate you can see from the valley. Not Richard, not Victoria, not Marcus, our children. The shack you're standing in is the original gatehouse of the Blackwood estate. My grandfather bought it in 1951 specifically to protect these documents. He hid them here because he knew what his other grandchildren were. Greedy, cruel, willing to do anything for money. He told me the truth a month before he died. He saw something in me that he didn't see in the others. Something worth trusting. Find Dr. Sarah Chen at the Virginia Historical Trust. She manages Blackwood Manor now. Show her these documents. She's been waiting for the true heirs to come forward for 30 years. The manor has been generating millions in revenue. Tours, events, film locations, all held in trust waiting for the rightful owners to claim it. That money belongs to our children now. One more thing, Elena, and please believe me, the brakes on my car didn't fail by accident. I was asking questions, getting too close to the truth. Someone didn't want those questions answered. Be careful. Trust no one from my family. I love you. I love Mason. I love Lily. Make them pay for what they've done, and then give our children the life they deserve. All my love forever. Daniel P.S. The tapping sound you might hear, it's the ventilation system. Wind through the tunnels. It scared me too the first time. Elena read the letter 3 times. Then she pressed it against her chest and wept. She cried for Daniel, for the secrets he had kept to protect her. For the death that now seemed so much more sinister than an accident. She cried for her children who had lost their father to something far worse than mechanical failure. She cried for herself for all the months of struggle, not knowing that the answer lay beneath her feet. And then she stopped crying. She dried her eyes, folded the letter carefully, tucked it into her pocket. Because Elena Hartwell had not survived foster care by falling apart when things got hard. She had not put herself through nursing school by giving up when the odds were against her. The Hartwells had laughed at her. They had stolen her husband. They had tried to destroy her children's future. Now she was going to destroy them instead. She gathered the most important documents and climbed back up the stairs into the light. Mason was waiting exactly where she had told him to wait. His face was pale with worry. "Mama, are you okay? You were down there forever." Elena knelt to look him in the eye. "I'm okay, sweetheart. I found something important." "What?" "I found?" She hesitated. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his father was murdered, that his family had tried to steal his birthright, that everything they thought they knew was a lie? "I found a letter from your dad," she said finally. "He left us a message, and tomorrow we're going to do exactly what he asked." What did he ask? Elena looked toward the valley. Through the trees barely visible in the fading light, she could see the outline of a massive mansion on the distant hillside. Blackwood Manor, her children's birthright. "He asked us to be brave," she said. "Can you do that for me, Mason? Can you be brave?" Her son looked at the shack behind them, at the baby sleeping in her carrier, at the vast unknown wilderness surrounding them on all sides. Then he looked at his mother. "Dad said you were the strongest person he ever met," he said. "So yeah, I can be brave." Elena hugged him so tightly she was afraid she might break him. They slept in the shack that night, huddled around a fire she managed to build in the ancient fireplace. The flames cast dancing shadows on the walls. The wind howled through the gaps in the boards. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called out lonely and wild. But Elena didn't sleep. She sat by the fire, the documents spread around her reading by flickering light. The more she read, the more she understood. The Blackwood family had owned Blackwood Manor since 1805. Generation after generation fathered a son, an unbroken line of inheritance, until 1943. That year, the last publicly known heir, Edward Blackwood, had died without children. At least that's what everyone believed. But according to these documents, Edward had a secret. A son born out of wedlock sent away to protect him from scandal. That son had changed his name to Hartwell. He was Daniel's grandfather, which meant Daniel was the true heir, which meant Mason and Lily were the true heirs. And Richard Hartwell had known. He had known all along. That's why he had given Elena the gatehouse, the only property that contained proof of the real lineage. He thought the documents were lost or destroyed. He thought she would sell the worthless shack and move on, never knowing what lay beneath. Instead, she had found everything. Elena looked at her sleeping children, at Mason curled in his sleeping bag, his history book tucked under his arm, at Lily peaceful in her carrier, her tiny chest rising and falling with each breath. Daniel had died trying to protect them. Now it was her turn. Tomorrow she would find Dr. Sarah Chen. She would present the documents. She would claim what was rightfully her children's, and then she would make Richard Hartwell pay for what he had done. But for now, she sat by the fire, watching over her children, planning her next move. The game had only just begun. The sun had barely risen when Elena loaded her children into the rental car. She had not slept. Not truly. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Daniel's handwriting. The brakes on my car didn't fail by accident. Those words burned in her mind like a brand. Her husband had been murdered, and the people who killed him had stood in front of her yesterday, laughing. Mason sat in the back seat, unusually quiet. He kept glancing at his mother's face in the rearview mirror, trying to read her expression. Elena knew she should say something reassuring. Tell him everything would be okay. But the words wouldn't come. Nothing was okay. Everything she had believed about Daniel's death was a lie. "Where are we going, Mama?" Mason finally asked. Elena gripped the steering wheel tighter. "To see someone who might be able to help us." "Who?" "A woman named Dr. Chen. She works at that big house we saw yesterday." Mason's eyes widened. "The one that looks like a castle." "That's the one. Are we going to live there?" Elena hesitated. The documents in her backpack told a story that seemed impossible. Her children, the rightful heirs to an $85 million estate. It sounded like a fairy tale. The kind of story you told yourself when reality became too painful to bear. But the documents were real. The DNA evidence would prove it, and once it did, everything would change. "Maybe," she said. "We'll see." The drive took 45 minutes. Elena followed an old path through the woods, guided by the property maps she had found in the vault. The road wound through ancient trees, their branches forming a canopy overhead. Morning mist clung to the ground, giving the forest an otherworldly quality. Then the trees parted and Blackwood Manor came into view. Elena's foot eased off the gas. The mansion was even more magnificent up close. White columns rose 3 stories high. Windows sparkled in the morning light. The grounds stretched for acres, perfectly manicured, dotted with gardens and fountains and sculptures. And there were people everywhere. Tour buses filled the parking lot. Visitors lined up at the entrance. A gift shop advertised souvenirs. A cafe offered breakfast specials. This wasn't an abandoned estate. This was a thriving business. Elena parked the car and sat for a long moment staring at the mansion that might belong to her children. "Mama?" Mason's voice was uncertain. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine, sweetheart." She wasn't fine. She was terrified, but terror was a luxury she couldn't afford. "Let's go." She strapped Lily into the carrier on her chest and took Mason's hand. Together they walked toward the entrance. The woman at the ticket booth gave her a strange look. Elena knew how she appeared. Hair uncombed, clothes wrinkled from sleeping on the floor. A baby strapped to her chest and a child clutching her hand. She didn't care. "I need to see Dr. Sarah Chen," Elena said. The woman's eyebrows rose. "Dr. Chen is our director of preservation. She doesn't meet with visitors without an appointment." "Tell her Elena Hartwell is here. Tell her I have documents from the gatehouse vault. Tell her I have a letter from Daniel." The woman's face changed. Something flickered in her eye. Recognition, fear? Elena couldn't tell. "Wait here," the woman said, reaching for a phone. 3 minutes passed, then 5. Mason tugged at Elena's hand. "Mama, everyone's staring at us." He was right. The other visitors in line were watching them with curiosity and suspicion. Elena's cheeks burned, but she refused to look away. She had nothing to be ashamed of. The Hartwells were the ones who should be ashamed. Then a door opened and a woman emerged. She was in her late 50s with steel-gray hair pulled back in a practical bun. Her handshake was firm, her eyes sharp with intelligence. But it was her expression that caught Elena's attention. It was the look of someone who had been waiting for something for a very long time. "Mrs. Hartwell, Soming," the woman said. "I'm Dr. Sarah Chen. Please follow me." She led them through a service entrance away from the crowds. Elena caught glimpses of the mansion's interior as they walked. Oil paintings, crystal chandeliers, antique furniture that probably cost more than she had earned in her entire life. This could belong to her children, if she was brave enough to claim it. Dr. Chen's office was small and cluttered, filled with books and papers and artifacts. She closed the door firmly behind them and locked it. "May I see what you found?" Elena hesitated. These documents were the only proof she had, the only evidence that could save her children's future, if something happened to them. But she had to trust someone. She pulled the leather portfolio from her backpack and handed it over. Chen put on reading glasses and began to examine the papers. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. Several times she stopped to take deep breaths. Her face grew paler with each document she reviewed. 10 minutes passed in silence. Then Dr. Chen set down the papers and removed her glasses. Her eyes were wet. "My God," she whispered. "It's real. After all these years, it's actually real." Elena's heart was pounding so hard she could barely speak. "What do you mean, these... I mean, these documents prove what I've suspected for 30 years. Dr. Chen leaned back in her chair. "Mrs. Hartwell, your children are the rightful heirs to Blackwood Manor. The land, the mansion, everything." The words hit Elena like a physical blow. She had hoped, she had even believed. But hearing it confirmed by someone else, someone who had dedicated her life to this estate, made it real in a way it hadn't been before. "How much is it worth?" Elena heard herself ask. "The current valuation, doctor." Chen consulted a file. $85 million, plus the accumulated trust funds which have been earning interest for 80 years. Mason looked up at his mother. "Is that a lot?" Elena couldn't answer. Her throat had closed completely. Dr. Chen smiled gently. "Yes, young man, that's quite a lot. But I don't understand," Elena finally managed. "If this place is so valuable, why hasn't anyone claimed it before? Why was it just sitting here waiting?" "Because the proof was hidden." Dr. Chen's expression darkened. In 1943, when Edward Blackwood died, everyone believed he had no children. The estate was placed in trust, managed by the Virginia Historical Trust until a legitimate heir could be found. For 80 years, we've been waiting. But Daniel's grandfather knew the truth. He did. He purchased the gatehouse in 1951 specifically to protect the documents, but he never came forward to claim the estate. Why not? Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. Fear, I believe. By the time Edward died, powerful people had invested heavily in keeping the estate unclaimed. Politicians, businessmen. They were profiting from the tours, the events, the revenue. A legitimate heir would have disrupted everything. You're saying they would have tried to stop him. I'm saying his decision to hide the documents wasn't paranoia, it was survival. Elena thought of Daniel's letter. The brakes on my car didn't fail by accident. History was repeating itself. There's something else you should know, Dr. Chen continued. Your brother-in-law, Richard Hartwell, has been trying to buy this property for 5 years. His company, Hartwell Holdings, has made increasingly aggressive offers. He claims a family connection, but has never produced documentation. He knows, Elena said flatly. He knows about all of this. That would be my assessment. And when Daniel started asking questions, Dr. Chen nodded slowly. I met your husband, Mrs. Hartwell. About a year ago, he came to me with questions about the Blackwood lineage. I told him what I knew, which wasn't much at the time. He said he was going to investigate further. She paused. A month later, I heard about his death. I've wondered ever since if the two were connected. Elena felt something harden inside her, something cold and sharp and dangerous. They are connected, she said. Daniel left me a letter. He knew he was in danger. He knew someone had targeted him. Do you have proof? Not yet, but I'm going to find it. Dr. Chen studied her for a long moment. Mrs. Hartwell, I've been managing this estate for 3 decades. I've seen claimants come and go, fortune hunters, con artists, distant relatives with fabricated documents. She leaned forward. You're different. I believe you're telling the truth, and I want to help you. How? First, we need DNA confirmation. We have samples preserved from the family crypt, hair and bone fragments from Edward Blackwood himself. If your children's DNA matches the trust, we'll have no choice but to recognize their claim." "Do it," Elena said immediately. "Today, now." "I'll contact Professor Edmund Whitmore at Georgetown. He's the leading expert in forensic genealogy. But Mrs. Hartwell, I need to warn you about something." "What?" "Once we begin this process, word will spread. Richard Hartwell will find out. He will fight you with every resource at his disposal. Lawyers, money, influence." Dr. Chen's voice dropped. "And possibly worse." Elena thought of the shack, the laughing faces, the cruelty. She thought of Daniel dead in a twisted wreck of metal because he had dared to seek the truth. She thought of her children sleeping on the floor of a $2 cabin while their birthright generated millions for people who had no claim to it. "Let him try," she said. The DNA test took 3 hours. Professor Whitmore arrived from Georgetown by helicopter carrying specialized equipment and accompanied by 2 graduate students. He was a compact man with wild white hair and the kind of energy that made Elena exhausted just watching him. "Remarkable," he exclaimed as he examined the documents. "Simply remarkable. The preservation is extraordinary. The provenance is impeccable. This is the find of a lifetime." He took cheek swabs from Mason and Lily, carefully cataloging each sample. Then he disappeared into a laboratory that had been set up in the mansion's east wing, leaving Elena to wait. And wait. And wait. Dr. Chen gave them a suite in the private guest quarters. 2 bedrooms, a sitting room, a bathroom with an actual bathtub. Mason ran from room to room, unable to believe what he was seeing. "This is bigger than our whole apartment," he shouted. "Mama, there's a bathtub you could swim in." Elena couldn't share his excitement. Every minute that passed was another minute for things to go wrong, for Richard to find out, for the Hartwells to launch their counterattack. She sat by the window watching the grounds below, waiting for the storm she knew was coming. It arrived faster than she expected. Her phone buzzed at 4:17 in the afternoon. Unknown number, Virginia area code. She answered it. "Elena Hartwell." The voice was male professional cold. "This is James Morrison, attorney, for Hartwell Holdings. I'm calling to inform you that my clients have become aware of certain fraudulent claims you're making against the Blackwood estate." Elena's grip tightened on the phone. "There's nothing fraudulent about it." "My clients disagree. They've instructed me to file an emergency injunction preventing any transfer of ownership until the matter can be resolved in court." "On what grounds?" "Suspicion of document forgery. Mental incompetence of the claimant. Endangerment of minor children by dragging them across the country on a delusional treasure hunt." Elena felt the blood drain from her face. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious, Mrs. Hartwell. My clients are also filing for emergency custody of your children on grounds of parental unfitness. A hearing has been scheduled for 9 o'clock tomorrow morning." The phone slipped from Elena's fingers. They were trying to take her children. Mason looked up from the book he'd been reading. "Mama, what's wrong?" Elena couldn't answer. She was shaking so badly she could barely stand. They were going to take her children. Richard Hartwell was going to steal her babies the same way he had stolen her husband. She had to do something. She had to fight. But how? She grabbed the phone and called Dr. Chen. "They're filing for custody," she gasped when the woman answered. "Tomorrow morning. They're trying to take my children." "Slow down. Tell me exactly what they said." Elena repeated the conversation word for word. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end. "This is a scare tactic," Dr. Chen finally said. "They're trying to pressure you into giving up before the DNA results come back. But what if it works? What if a judge believes them? They won't. The custody claim is baseless and everyone knows it. You have a stable environment here, security resources. Any judge will see through their manipulation." "You don't know them," Elena said. "You don't know what they're capable of." "Actually, I do." Dr. Chen's voice hardened. "I've been watching Richard Hartwell operate for 5 years. He's arrogant and he's ruthless, but he's not invincible. He's made enemies, lots of them, and now he's made a mistake." "What mistake?" "He's underestimated you." There was a knock at the door. Elena jumped to her rear, her heart racing. "Mrs. Hartwell," a voice from outside. "Professor Whitmore has the results." Elena's legs nearly gave out beneath her. The DNA results, everything depended on what those results said. She opened the door and followed the assistant down the corridor, Mason at her heels. They entered the laboratory where Professor Whitmore was standing beside a computer screen, his face unreadable. "Well?" Elena asked. Her voice came out as barely a whisper. Professor Whitmore turned to face her. For a moment, his expression remained neutral. Then he smiled. "Congratulations, Mrs. Hartwell. Your children are a 99.97% match to Edward Blackwood's DNA profile. There is no scientific doubt. Mason and Lily are the direct descendants of the Blackwood family." Elena sat down hard in the nearest chair. It was true. It was really actually undeniably true. Her children were the rightful heirs to Blackwood Manor. Mason tugged at her sleeve. "Mama, does that mean the castle is ours?" Elena looked at her son, at his bright eyes and hopeful face, at the child who had lost so much and deserved so much more. "Yes, baby, Humpel," she said. "The castle is ours." But the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The custody hearing was scheduled for 9 o'clock the next morning. Elena spent the night preparing with Patricia Ashford, the trust's lead attorney. They went over every detail of her life, every job she'd held, every apartment she'd lived in, every decision she'd made since Daniel's death. "They're going to try to paint you as unstable," Patricia warned. "A woman so desperate for money that she fabricated documents and dragged her children into a delusion." "But the documents are real. The DNA proves it." "That doesn't matter to them. They're not trying to win the case. They're trying to buy time. Every day they can delay the transfer of ownership is another day they can search for ways to undermine your claim." "So what do? We show the judge exactly who you are. A devoted mother who crossed the country to claim her children's birthright. A woman who has nothing to hide and everything to fight for." Elena nodded slowly. "And the Hartwells, what do we show about them?" Patricia smiled grimly. "We show the judge exactly who they are, too." The courtroom was packed. Elena hadn't expected that. She had imagined a small hearing. In private, just the lawyers and the judge. Instead, the gallery was filled with reporters, local officials, curious onlookers who had heard about the case and wanted to see the drama unfold. Richard Hartwell sat at the opposite table, flanked by 3 attorneys in expensive suits. He looked calm, confident, as if this were just another business meeting. Victoria sat behind him, her face carefully composed. Marcus was nowhere to be seen. Elena's hands were shaking. She clasped them in her lap to hide it. "All rise," the bailiff announced. "The Honorable Judge Margaret Thompson presiding." The judge was a stern-faced woman in her 60s with silver hair and piercing eyes. She surveyed the courtroom with an expression that suggested she had no patience for nonsense. "Be seated," she said. "This is a hearing on the emergency petition for custody of minors Mason and Lily Hartwell. Mr. Morrison, you may proceed." Richard's attorney rose. He was smooth-polished, the kind of lawyer who charged $500 an hour and earned every penny. "Your Honor, my clients are deeply concerned about the welfare of these children. Their mother has exhibited increasingly erratic behavior since the death of her husband 6 months ago. She sold all her possessions, withdrew her children from school, and transported them across the country to pursue a baseless claim against a historic estate." "Objection," Patricia said calmly. "Counsel is characterizing facts that have not been established." "Sustained. Mr. Morrison, stick to facts." Morrison nodded smoothly. "Your Honor, the facts are these. Mrs. Hartwell is currently living in a 2-room shack without running water or electricity. She has less than $300 to her name. She has been making claims about $1-million inheritances based on documents that my clients believe are forged." "The documents have been authenticated by 3 independent experts," Patricia interrupted. "Perhaps, but the point remains that Mrs. Hartwell has uprooted her children's lives based on uncertain claims. Is that the behavior of a stable parent?" Elena felt her face flush with anger. He was twisting everything, making her sound crazy when she was just trying to protect her family. Judge Thompson turned to Patricia. "Counselor, your response." Patricia stood. "Your Honor, my client is not living in a shack. She is currently residing in guest quarters at Blackwood Manor at the invitation of the Virginia Historical Trust, while her children's claim to the estate is being processed." "Guest quarters at the manor." The judge's eyebrows rose. "That's correct. Furthermore, the DNA evidence confirms, beyond any scientific doubt, that Mason and Lily Hartwell are the direct descendants of Edward Blackwood, the last recognized owner of the estate. Their claim is not baseless. It is irrefutable." Morrison jumped to his feet. "The DNA evidence has not been independently verified. It was conducted by Professor Edmund Whitmore of Georgetown University, one of the most respected forensic genealogists in the country, who was hired by the trust, which has a vested interest in the outcome. As opposed to your clients who have been trying to purchase the estate for 5 years and have every reason to want the legitimate heirs to fail." "Enough." Judge Thompson held up her hand. "I've heard enough arguments. Mrs. Hartwell, please approach the bench." Elena's heart stopped. She rose on trembling legs and walked to stand before the judge. "Mrs. Hartwell, I want to hear from you directly. Why did you bring your children to Virginia?" Elena took a deep breath. "Because their great-grandfather left me a property in his will. I didn't know what it was until I got here. I thought it might be a house I could sell or land that might have some value. I had no idea what was hidden beneath it. And when you discovered these documents, I did what any mother would do. I tried to secure my children's future. They lost their father 6 months ago, Your Honor. They've been through more pain than any children should have to bear. If there was even a chance that these documents were real, I had to pursue it. And now that the DNA has confirmed your children's claim," Elena looked directly at the judge, "now I'm going to fight for what belongs to them. Not for money, not for mansions, because their father died trying to uncover this truth, and I owe it to his memory to finish what he started." The courtroom was silent. Judge Thompson studied Elena for a long moment. Then she turned to Richard Hartwell. "Mr. Hartwell, please approach." Richard rose smoothly, straightening his tie as he walked to the bench. "Mr. Hartwell, I've reviewed your petition. I've also reviewed the history of your company's attempts to acquire Blackwood Manor. 5 offers in 5 years, each one rejected by the trust." The judge's voice was cold. "It appears to me that this custody petition is less about child welfare and more about using the court system to interfere with a legitimate inheritance claim." Richard's face reddened. "Your Honor, I assure you." "I'm not finished." Judge Thompson's eyes were hard. "This court will not be used as a weapon against a grieving widow and her children. The petition for emergency custody is denied." Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. Denied. They couldn't take her children, but the judge wasn't done. "Furthermore, I'm ordering an investigation into the circumstances surrounding the petition. If I find evidence that it was filed in bad faith, there will be consequences." She turned back to Elena. "Mrs. Hartwell, the court wishes you well in your claim. You're free to go." Elena walked out of the courtroom on legs that felt like rubber. The reporters shouted questions. Cameras flashed. She ignored all of it, focused only on getting to her children, who were waiting with Dr. Chen in a secure room. Mason ran to her the moment she entered. "Mama, what happened? Are we in trouble?" Elena knelt and wrapped her arms around him. "No, baby, we're not in trouble. The judge said we can stay." "And the castle?" "The castle, too." She held him tightly, breathing in the scent of his hair, feeling his small heart beating against hers. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. Richard Hartwell caught up with her in the parking lot. "You think you've won?" he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You haven't won anything. Those documents are fake and everyone will see it eventually." Elena turned to face him. "The DNA doesn't lie. DNA can be manipulated. Experts can be bought. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "I know exactly what I'm dealing with." Elena stepped closer. "A man who murdered his own brother to protect his secrets." Richard's face went white. "What did you say?" "Daniel left me a letter. He knew what you did. He knew the brakes on his car didn't fail by accident." "That's insane. That's the truth. And when I prove it, you won't just lose the estate. You'll lose everything." Richard stared at her. For the first time since she had known him, he looked afraid. "You're making a mistake," he said. "A very serious mistake." "No." Elena's voice was steady. "You made the mistake. When you laughed at me in front of that shack. When you thought I would give up. When you underestimated what a mother will do to protect her children." She turned and walked away, leaving Richard standing alone in the parking lot. When she glanced back, he was already on his phone. She knew he was planning something. She just didn't know what. The answer came 3 days later. Elena was in Dr. Chen's office reviewing the paperwork for the formal transfer of ownership when her phone buzzed with an incoming message. Unknown number. She opened it. There was no text, just a photograph. A photograph of Mason walking to school that morning, taken from across the street. Elena's blood turned to ice. They were watching her children. She showed the photo to Dr. Chen, who immediately called security. "We need to increase protection," Dr. Chen said. "Around the clock. No one approaches those children without authorization." "That's not enough." Elena's voice was shaking. "They're threatening my son. They sent me a picture of my son." "We'll go to the police." "The police can't stop Richard Hartwell. He has too much money, too many connections." "Then what do you suggest?" Elena thought for a long moment. Richard was powerful. He was ruthless. He had resources she couldn't match, but he also had weaknesses. Marcus, she said suddenly. Richard's brother. He tried to warn me at the shack. He said there was more to the story than I knew. You think he might help? I think he's the only one who might. Elena grabbed her jacket. I need to find him. That's dangerous. If Richard finds out... Richard already knows everything. He sent someone to photograph my child. He's not going to stop until he destroys us. Elena's jaw tightened. Unless we destroy him first. She found Marcus at a bar in town. He was sitting alone in a corner booth nursing a whiskey that looked like it wasn't his first. His face was haggard, his eyes bloodshot. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. Elena slid into the seat across from him. Marcus looked up. His expression cycled through surprise, fear, and something that might have been relief. You shouldn't be here, he said. Richard sent someone to photograph my son outside his school. Marcus closed his eyes. I warned you. I told you to be careful. Careful isn't going to cut it anymore. Elena leaned forward. I need your help, Marcus. You said there was more to this story. You said your grandfather had a reason for leaving me the gatehouse. Tell me what you know. If I tell you, Richard will destroy me. Richard is going to destroy you anyway. He destroys everyone eventually. You know that. Marcus was silent for a long moment. He stared into his whiskey as if the amber liquid held answers. Our grandfather told me something before he died, Soap, he said finally. I was 12 years old. He pulled me aside at Christmas dinner and said, Marcus, someday someone is going to come looking for the truth. When they do, you help them. Promise me. What truth? He never said, but I've wondered about it my whole life. And when Daniel started asking questions last year, Marcus's voice cracked. I knew he was the one grandfather was talking about. Did you help him? I tried. I gave him some old family papers documents I'd found in grandfather's study after he died. Daniel was excited. He said they confirmed something he'd suspected. He was going to confront Richard. And then he died. Marcus nodded miserably. The next day, the brakes on his car. You knew. Elena's voice was cold. You knew Richard was involved and you said nothing. What could I say? I had no proof, just suspicions. Marcus looked up at her, his eyes wet. I've been living with that guilt for 6 months. Every night I see Daniel's face. Every morning I wake up hating myself. Elena wanted to hate him, part of her did. But she also saw something in his eyes that she recognized. The weight of impossible choices, the burden of knowing too much and being powerless to act. You can make it right, she said. Help me now. Tell me everything you know. Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black notebook. It was worn, the leather cover cracked with age. This is grandfather's journal, he said. I've had it since he died. I never showed it to anyone. Not Richard, not Victoria, not even Daniel. He pushed it across the table. I think it has the answers you're looking for. Elena took the notebook. Her hands were trembling. Richard can never know I gave you this, Marcus said. If he finds out, he won't find out. Promise me something. What? Marcus looked at her with desperate intensity. When this is over, if I testify against him, if I help you bring him down, will you protect my daughters? He'll come after them to hurt me. He'll use them as leverage. Your daughters? They're 7 and 4. Their mother left last year. Couldn't take the family drama anymore. Marcus's voice broke. They're all I have, Elena. They're the only thing in my life that matters. Elena thought of Mason, of Lily, of the photograph on her phone. She understood what he was asking. I'll protect them, she said. I give you my word. Marcus nodded slowly. He stood up, threw some bills on the table, and walked toward the door. Then he stopped. Elena. Yes. Daniel was a good man. The best of us, really. He deserved better than this family. Marcus's voice was barely a whisper. Make sure his children get the life he wanted for them. Then he was gone, disappearing into the night. Elena sat alone in the booth, the notebook heavy in her hands. She opened it to the first page, and what she read changed everything. The journal was written in small, cramped handwriting that Elena had to squint to read. Harold Hartwell. Well, Daniel's grandfather had documented everything, every secret, every lie, every crime. She sat in Dr. Chen's office until 3 a.m, turning pages with trembling hands. The first entry was dated 1951. I have purchased the gatehouse today. The documents are safe. No one knows where I have hidden them. Richard Sr. suspects something, but he will never find the truth. I have made sure of that. Edward's legacy will be preserved even if it takes generations to reclaim. Elena kept reading. The entries spanned decades. Harold wrote about watching his grandchildren grow up, about seeing the darkness in Richard's eyes from an early age, about his fear that the wrong people would discover the truth before the right ones. One entry made Elena's blood run cold. March 15, 1998. Richard found the old property maps today. He asked me about the gatehouse. I told him it was worthless, a sentimental purchase from my younger days. He didn't believe me. I saw it in his face. He will investigate. He will dig. I must move the documents to a safer location. And then near the end, an entry from just weeks before Harold's death. I have told Daniel everything. He is the only one I trust. The only one who inherited his father's honor instead of his uncle's greed. Daniel will protect the truth. Daniel will reclaim what belongs to our bloodline. I pray I live long enough to see it happen, but I fear my time is running out. The final entry was dated 3 days before Harold died. Someone has been watching the gatehouse, a car parked on the road for hours. I recognize the license plate. It belongs to one of Richard's companies. He knows something. I don't know how much, but if anything happens to me, Daniel must be warned. The documents must be protected. Everything depends on it. Elena closed the journal. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold it. Harold Hartwell had known. He had known that Richard was dangerous. He had tried to warn Daniel. And now, reading between the lines, she was almost certain that Harold's death hadn't been natural either. 2 deaths, 2 accidents, both connected to the same secret, both connected to Richard. She picked up her phone and called Patricia Ashford. "I have evidence," she said. "I have everything we need." The meeting took place the next morning in the Trust's secure conference room. Dr. Chen was there, Patricia Ashford, Professor Whitmore, 2 FBI agents who had been quietly investigating financial crimes in Virginia for months, and Elena sitting at the head of the table with the journal in front of her. "This changes everything," Patricia said after reviewing the entries. Harold Hartwell documented Richard's surveillance of the gatehouse. He expressed fear for his safety. Combined with Daniel's letter about the brake tampering, we have a pattern. "A pattern isn't proof," one of the FBI agents said. His name was Agent Rodriguez, and he had been tracking Hartwell Holdings for 3 years. "We need concrete evidence of criminal activity." "What about the journal itself?" "Circumstantial. A defense attorney would argue it's the paranoid writings of an old man." Elena's jaw tightened. "So Richard just gets away with it. He kills 2 people and walks free." "I didn't say that." Agent Rodriguez leaned forward. "I said we need more evidence, and I think I know where to find it." "Where?" "Marcus Hartwell." Elena's heart skipped. "Marcus gave me the journal. He's already risked everything." "He can risk more. Marcus has been inside Hartwell Holdings for years. He knows where the bodies are buried, figuratively speaking. If he's willing to cooperate fully, wear a wire, give us access to internal documents, we can build a case that will put Richard away for life. And if he's not willing, then we have a much harder road ahead." Elena thought about Marcus, about his bloodshot eye and trembling hands, about his daughters 7 and 4, who had no idea their father was caught in a nightmare he couldn't escape. "I'll talk to him," she said. "I'll convince him." She found Marcus at the same bar where they had met before. He was drinking again, his face even more haggard than the last time. "They want you to testify," Elena said without preamble. "The FBI. They want you to wear a wire and help them build a case against Richard." Marcus laughed bitterly. "Of course they do. They want me to sign my own death warrant. Richard is going to destroy you anyway. You said so yourself. There's a difference between being destroyed and being dead." Marcus took a long drink. "You don't know what he's capable of, Elena. You've seen glimpses, but you don't really know." "Then tell me." Marcus was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "When we were kids, Richard had a dog, a golden retriever named Max. Sweetest animal you ever saw." He paused. "One day Richard got angry about something. I don't even remember what. He took Max out behind the barn, and we never saw that dog again." Elena felt sick. "He was a child." "He was 12, old enough to know exactly what he was doing." Marcus looked up at her with haunted eyes. "That's who Richard is, Elena. That's what you're dealing with. He doesn't see people, he sees obstacles, and when an obstacle gets in his way, he removes it. So you're just going to let him win?" "I'm going to protect my daughters." "By doing nothing, by letting him continue to hurt people." Elena leaned forward. "Marcus, I made you a promise. I said I would protect your girls. But you have to help me. You have to give me something I can use." "What if I don't have anything? You do. I can see it in your eyes. Elena reached across the table and grabbed his hand. Daniel trusted you. He gave you the documents he found because he believed in you. Don't let his faith be misplaced. Marcus stared at their joined hands. A tear slid down his cheek. There's a safe, he said finally, in Richard's private office. He thinks no one knows about it, but I was there once when he opened it. I saw the combination. I saw what was inside. What was inside? Papers. Lots of papers. Insurance policies on family members. Modified wills. Bank statements from offshore accounts. Marcus's voice dropped even lower. And a file labeled DH with Daniel's initials. Elena's heart stopped. A file on Daniel. I only saw it for a second, but I remember thinking it was strange. Why would Richard keep a separate file on his own brother, unless that file contained evidence of how Daniel died? Can you get into that safe? Elena asked. Marcus hesitated. Then slowly he nodded. Tonight. Richard is having dinner with investors in Richmond. He won't be back until after midnight. Then we go tonight. Get. The drive to Hartwell Holdings took 40 minutes. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Marcus's rental car, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. This was insane. Breaking into Richard's office, stealing documents from his safe. If they were caught, everything would be over. But if they didn't try, Richard would keep winning, keep hurting people, keep getting away with murder. Security changes shifts at 9:15, Marcus said. We'll have a 12-minute window to get in and out. You've done this before. Once, last year, I was looking for something that would help me get out from under Richard's thumb. He laughed bitterly. I didn't find it, but I memorized the security patterns. What happened when Richard found out? He didn't find out. That's the only reason I'm still alive. They parked in a lot 3 blocks away and walked the rest of the distance. Elena's legs felt like rubber. Every shadow seemed to hide a threat. Every sound made her jump. The building was a modern glass tower, 12 stories high, with Hartwell Holdings emblazoned across the entrance in gold letters. During the day, it was full of employees and clients and the normal bustle of business. At night, it was almost empty. Almost. Cleaning crew is on the 5th floor, Marcus said, checking his phone. Richard's office is on 12. We should be fine. They entered through a side door that Marcus opened with a key card. Inside the lobby was dark and silent. Their footsteps echoed on the marble floor as they made their way to the elevators. Cameras, Elena whispered. Disabled for the next 15 minutes. I have a friend in security. You trust him? I trust that he owes me $50,000 and doesn't want his wife to find out why. The elevator ride to the 12th floor seemed to last forever. Elena watched the numbers climb, her stomach churning with fear and anticipation. When the doors opened, she saw a reception area with plush furniture and expensive art. Beyond it, a corridor led to a set of double doors with Richard's name on a brass plaque. That's it, Marcus said. Let's go. The office was exactly what Elena had expected. Massive desk, leather chairs, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, everything designed to intimidate, to impress, to remind visitors that Richard Hartwell was a powerful man. But Elena wasn't intimidated. Not anymore. Where's the safe? Marcus walked to a bookshelf lined with leather-bound volumes. He reached behind a set of law books and pressed something. There was a click and a panel swung open to reveal a steel door with a digital keypad. 379241, Marcus murmured, punching in the numbers. The safe opened with a soft beep. Inside were stacks of documents just as Marcus had described. Elena grabbed everything stuffing papers into the bag she had brought. Insurance policies, bank statements, legal documents with signatures that looked forged. And then she saw it. A manila folder with DH written on the tab. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were photographs. Photographs of Daniel's car. Close-up shots of the brake lines clearly cut. A receipt from an auto shop she didn't recognize dated 3 days before Daniel's death. And a handwritten note in Richard's distinctive script. Problem solved. Payment transferred. Destroy this file. Elena's vision blurred with tears. Here it was, the proof she had been searching for, the evidence that Richard had murdered her husband. Elena, Marcus's voice was urgent. We need to go, now. She shoved the file into her bag and followed him out of the office. They were in the elevator, the doors closing, when her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I see you? Elena's blood turned to ice. Marcus, we've been spotted. His face went white. That's impossible. I disabled the cameras. Someone is watching. We need to move. The elevator doors opened on the ground floor. They They ran for the exit, not caring about stealth anymore. Behind them, Elena heard shouting. Security guards, probably. Or worse. They burst through the side door and sprinted toward the parking lot. Elena's lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. They reached the car just as a black SUV screeched around the corner, blocking their path. 2 men jumped out. Big, muscular, the kind of men who hurt people for money. Give us the bag, one of them said. Elena clutched it tighter. No. Give us the bag and we'll let you walk away. This doesn't have to get ugly. I said no. The man took a step forward. Elena braced herself, ready to fight, ready to run, ready to do whatever it took to protect the evidence in her hands. And then sirens. Red and blue lights exploded from every direction. Police cars surrounded the parking lot, officers pouring out with weapons drawn. FBI on the ground, now. The 2 men looked at each other. For a moment, Elena thought they might run. Then their shoulders slumped and they dropped to their knees. Agent Rodriguez appeared at Elena's side. Are you okay? You were following us. We've been following everyone connected to this case for weeks. When you left the bar with Marcus, we knew something was happening. He looked at the bag in her hands. Did you find what you were looking for? Elena opened the bag and showed him the Daniel Hartwell file. Rodriguez's expression hardened. That's it. That's proof of the murder. That's proof of everything. He took the file carefully as if it might explode. Then he looked at Marcus, who was leaning against the car, his face gray with shock. Mr. Hartwell, I'm going to need you to come with us. You're not under arrest, but we have a lot of questions. Marcus nodded weakly. Whatever you need. I'll tell you everything. Elena watched them lead him away. Part of her felt sorry for him. He had risked everything to help her. Now he would have to face the consequences of years of complicity. But mostly she felt relief. It was over. Richard couldn't hurt them anymore, or so she thought. The arrest happened at 7 the next morning. Elena was at Blackwood Manor having breakfast with her children when Dr. Chen burst into the room. They got him, she said breathlessly. Richard, the FBI arrested him at his home an hour ago. Victoria, too. They're both in custody. Mason looked up from his cereal. The bad people... Yes, sweetheart. Elena's voice was thick with emotion. The bad people. Does that mean we're safe now? Yes, we're safe. But safety, she was learning, was a relative term. The news exploded across every channel. Hartwell heir arrested for murder. FBI uncovers decades of fraud. Widow's evidence brings down real estate empire. Reporters camped outside Blackwood Manor. Interview requests flooded in from every major network. Elena's phone didn't stop ringing for days. She ignored all of it. She had more important things to focus on. The formal transfer of ownership took place 2 weeks later. Elena stood in the great hall of Blackwood Manor, surrounded by lawyers and officials and representatives from the Virginia Historical Trust. Mason held her hand. Lily slept in her carrier. By the authority vested in me by the Commonwealth of Virginia, the judge announced, I hereby declare that the Blackwood estate, including all lands, buildings, and assets, is transferred to the lawful heirs, Mason and Lily Hartwell, with their mother Elena Hartwell serving as guardian and trustee. It was done. $85 million. 2,000 acres of land. A mansion that had stood for over 2 centuries. It all belonged to her children. Elena looked down at Mason. His eyes were wide, trying to understand the magnitude of what had just happened. Does this mean we can stay? He asked. Yes, baby, we can stay forever. And we don't have to go back to the shack. Elena laughed through her tears. No, we never have to go back to the shack. But she would go back, not to live, but to remember, to remind herself of where they had started, of how far they had come, of the $2 inheritance that had turned out to be worth more than anyone had ever imagined. The trial took place 4 months later. Elena testified for 6 hours, recounting everything from the moment she arrived in Virginia to the night she and Marcus broke into Richard's office. She showed the court the documents, the photographs, the handwritten note proving Richard had ordered her husband's murder. Richard sat at the defense table, his expensive suit now wrinkled, his arrogant expression replaced by something that looked almost like fear. Mrs. Hartwell, the prosecutor asked, can you describe how you felt when you discovered the truth about your husband's death? Elena looked directly at Richard. I felt grief, anger, a rage so deep I thought it might consume me. She paused. But mostly I felt determined. Determined to get justice for Daniel. Determined to protect my children. Determined to make sure the man who destroyed our family would pay for what he did. And what about now? How do you feel now? Elena thought about it. About the shack, the vault, the documents, the long, terrible journey that had brought her to this moment. "I feel at peace," she said finally. "Not because Richard is going to prison, but because the truth is finally out. Daniel's sacrifice wasn't in vain. His children have the future he wanted for them, and the Hartwell legacy, the real legacy, will continue." The jury deliberated for less than a day. Guilty on all counts. Richard Hartwell was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for murder, fraud, and conspiracy. Victoria received 12 years for her role in the financial crimes. Marcus, in exchange for his testimony, was given 3 years with possibility of early parole. As Richard was led away in handcuffs, he turned to look at Elena one final time. "This isn't over," he snarled. "I'll appeal, I'll get out, and when I do—" "Save it," Elena interrupted. "You're not going to appeal. You're not going to get out. And even if you did, you'd have nothing. Your company is bankrupt. Your assets are frozen. Your reputation is destroyed." She stepped closer to the barrier separating them. "You spent your whole life taking from people, hurting people, thinking you were untouchable." She smiled coldly. "How does it feel to finally face consequences?" Richard's face contorted with rage, but the guards pulled him away before he could respond. Elena watched him go, feeling something shift inside her. It was finished. Finally, truly finished. She walked out of the courthouse into bright afternoon sunshine. Dr. Chen was waiting with the children. Mason ran to her immediately, throwing his arm around her waist. "Is it over, Mama? Is the bad man going to prison forever?" "For a very long time, sweetheart. A very long time." Patricia Ashford appeared at her side. "The press wants a statement." Elena looked at the crowd of reporters, their cameras and microphones pointed at her like weapons. "I'll give them one." She stepped up to the microphones, Mason's hand still clasped in hers. 6 months ago, I arrived in Virginia with nothing. Less than nothing. I had 2 children, a broken heart, and a $2 inheritance that my husband's family gave me as a cruel joke. She paused, letting the words sink in. What I found beneath that inheritance was the truth. A truth that people had killed to protect. A truth that my husband died trying to uncover. She looked directly into the cameras. Daniel Hartwell was a good man, the best man I've ever known. He loved his children more than anything in this world. He wanted them to have a life free from the corruption and cruelty that defined his family. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on. Today that wish has finally been granted. Richard Hartwell will spend the rest of his life in prison. My children will grow up knowing that their father's death meant something, and the Blackwood legacy, after 80 years of uncertainty, has finally found its rightful heirs. A reporter shouted a question. "Mrs. Hartwell, what are your plans for the estate?" Elena smiled. "We're going to turn it into something Daniel would be proud of, a place for education and community, a place where families can come together, a place where the past is honored but the future is bright." She looked down at Mason. "My son said it best. This isn't just a house. It's a home, and we're going to make sure it feels like home for everyone who walks through its doors." "What about the money? $85 million is a lot of responsibility." "It is, but I didn't fight for the money. I fought for my children. I fought for justice. The money is just a tool to help us do good in the world." She paused. "We're establishing the Daniel Hartwell Memorial Foundation. It will provide scholarships for children who have lost parents, because I know what it's like to grow up without family. I know how hard it is to make it on your own, and I want to make sure no child ever has to feel that alone." The reporters shouted more questions, but Elena was done. She gathered her children and walked away from the cameras, away from the chaos, toward the car that would take them home. Home. Blackwood Manor. Their home now. As they drove through the gates, Mason pressed his face against the window. "Mama!" "Yes, sweetheart. Do you think Dad can see us?" Elena felt tears spring to her eyes. "I think he can, baby. I think he's watching right now, and I think he's very, very proud." "I miss him." "I miss him too, every single day." "But we're going to be okay, right?" Elena looked at the mansion rising before them, at the land that stretched for miles in every direction, at the legacy that her children would inherit, protect, and pass on to their own children someday. "Yes, Mason, we're going to be more than okay. We're going to be exactly who your father wanted us to be." That night, after the children were asleep, Elena walked to the window of the master bedroom and looked out at the valley below. She could see the gatehouse in the distance, the $2 shack that had started everything. It looked different now in the moonlight, smaller, less threatening. Just an old building with an extraordinary secret. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. The grief, the fear, The moments when she had almost given up. The people who had tried to destroy her, and the ones who had helped her survive. She thought about Daniel, about the letter he had left her, about the truth he had died protecting. Make them pay for what they've done, and then give our children the life they deserve. She had done it, both parts, the paying and the giving, and now finally she could rest. But rest she knew was temporary. There was still so much to do, a foundation to build, an estate to manage, children to raise, a legacy to protect. The battle was over, but the work was just beginning. Elena smiled and turned away from the window. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new obstacles, new opportunities. She was ready for all of them. Richard was convicted and sentenced to 25 years. Victoria got 12 years. Marcus got 3 years, with parole possibility. Elena announced the Daniel Hartwell Memorial Foundation. She's now at Blackwood Manor with her children. The battle is over, but the work is just beginning. Part 4 should focus on building the new life, the foundation work healing process, maybe some new challenges, character development, the estate management. Let me write Part 4 with all these requirements in mind, keeping the emotional and dramatic tone while moving the story forward. Part 4. 6 months had passed since Richard Hartwell disappeared behind prison walls. Elena stood at the window of her office in the east wing of Blackwood Manor, watching the morning light spread across the valley. Below her, the grounds were already busy with activity. Gardeners trimmed the hedges. Tour guides gathered for their morning briefing. A school bus pulled into the parking lot, bringing the first group of students for the day's educational program. Everything had changed. Everything was still changing. Her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and felt her stomach tighten. The caller ID showed a number she had memorized but never wanted to see again. Virginia State Penitentiary. She let it ring 4 times before answering. Hello, Mrs. Hartwell. A professional voice clipped and efficient. This is Warden Patterson at Virginia State. I'm calling regarding inmate Richard Hartwell. Elena's grip on the phone tightened. What about him? He's requested a visitor. You specifically. Absolutely not. I understand your reluctance, ma'am, but he claims he has information you need. Information about your late husband that wasn't revealed during the trial. Elena's heart stopped. What kind of information would... He wouldn't say, only that it's something you'll want to know, something that changes everything. She should hang up. She should refuse. She should never think about Richard Hartwell again for as long as she lived. But the words echoed in her mind. Something that changes everything. When, she heard herself ask. Tomorrow, 10 o'clock. I'll add your name to the visitor list. The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, her mind racing. Richard was manipulating her. That's what he did. That's who he was. He had spent his entire life twisting people, using them, discarding them when they were no longer useful. But what if he really did know something? What if there was more? To Daniel's story, she needed advice. She needed someone who understood the situation, who could help her see clearly through the fog of emotion. She called Dr. Chen. He's playing you, Sarah said without hesitation. Richard Hartwell doesn't have information. He has an agenda. What if you're wrong? What if I'm right? What if you walk into that prison and he says something that breaks you, something designed specifically to hurt you as much as possible? I can handle it. Can you, Elena? You've been through hell. You've won. Why would you voluntarily step back into the fire? Elena was quiet for a long moment. She thought about Daniel, about the letter he had left her, about all the secrets that had nearly destroyed their family. Because I need to know, she said finally. Whatever he's hiding, whatever he hasn't told me, I need to know. For Daniel, for my children, for myself. Sarah sighed. Then I'm coming with you. You don't have to. Yes, I do. You're not facing that monster alone. Not ever again. The drive to Virginia State Penitentiary took 3 hours. Elena sat in the passenger seat of Sarah's car, watching the landscape slide past. Rolling hills, farmland, small towns that looked frozen in time. Normal places where normal people lived normal lives. She didn't feel normal. She hadn't felt normal since the day she arrived in Virginia. Maybe she never would again. What do you think he wants? Sarah asked. Power, control, the ability to hurt me one more time. Then why give him that? Because I've learned something in the past 6 months. Elena turned to look at her friend. The only way to beat people like Richard is to stop being afraid of them. He has power over me as long as I'm running, as long as I'm hiding, as long as I'm letting fear make my decisions. She took a deep breath. I'm done running. Sarah reached over and squeezed her hand. Then let's finish this. The prison was exactly what Elena had expected. Gray, cold, oppressive, guards everywhere. the smell of disinfectant and despair. They processed through security in silence. Elena surrendered her phone, her purse, her dignity. She walked through metal detectors and submitted to pat-downs and answered questions from officials who looked at her with barely concealed curiosity. Everyone knew who she was. Everyone knew what Richard had done. Finally, they led her to a small room with a table and 2 chairs. One wall was glass, allowing guards to observe from outside. "He'll be here in a moment," the guard said. "You have 30 minutes." Elena nodded. Her hands were trembling. She clasped them together to hide it. The door on the opposite side of the room opened. Richard Hartwell shuffled in his wrists and ankles shackled. He looked different, smaller somehow. The arrogance was still there, in his eyes, but it was dimmer now, buried under layers of exhaustion and defeat. He sat down across from her. "Elena," he said, "you came. You said you had information." "Straight to business. I always admired that about you." He leaned back in his chair. "Most people waste time with pleasantries. You don't. You go right for the throat." "I don't have time for games, Richard. Say what you have to say." "Fine." His eyes flickered with something. Amusement, malice, she couldn't tell. "I want to tell you about the night Daniel died." Elena's blood turned to ice. "I already know what happened. You tampered with his brakes. You murdered him." "I ordered it done, yes, but there's something you don't know. Something that wasn't in the file you stole from my office." "What?" Richard smiled. It was the same cold, calculating smile she remembered from the day at the shack. "Daniel wasn't supposed to die that night." Elena's breath caught. "What are you talking about?" "The brake line was cut, yes, but it was designed to fail slowly, over days, not hours. He was supposed to have a minor accident, something that would scare him, make him stop asking questions." Richard's smile faded. But something went wrong. The line failed faster than expected. By the time he reached the mountain road, he had no brakes at all. "You're lying." "I'm not. Check the autopsy report. Check the accident reconstruction. The failure point was catastrophic. It shouldn't have happened the way it did." He leaned forward. "Someone else tampered with that car after my people did. Someone who wanted Daniel dead, not just scared." Elena's mind was reeling. "Who?" "I don't know, but I've had a lot of time to think in here, and I've come up with a theory." "Tell me." "What if there was someone else who knew about the Blackwood documents? Someone who had even more to lose than me if the truth came out, "Like who?" Richard's eyes bored into hers. "Like my grandfather's lawyer, Thomas Green." Elena felt the floor shift beneath her. Thomas Green, the man who had called her about the inheritance, the man who had told her about the gatehouse, the man who had been handling the Hartwell family's legal affairs for over 40 years. "That's impossible," she whispered. "Is it Green has been managing the family trust since before I was born? He knew about the Blackwood connection before any of us. He's been paid millions over the years to keep that secret buried." Richard's voice dropped. "What if he decided that Daniel getting too close to the truth was a threat not just to me, but to him? You're making this up. You're trying to confuse me." "I'm trying to warn you." Richard's expression changed. For a moment, he almost looked sincere. "Green is still out there, Elena, still practicing law, still handling family business for what's left of us. And if he really did accelerate Daniel's death, what do you think he'll do when he realizes you're getting too close to the truth?" Elena stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. "This conversation is over." "Elena, wait. I'm not lying. I hated my brother, yes. I wanted him out of the way, but I didn't want him dead. Not like that." Richard's voice cracked. "He was still my brother." Elena stared at him. For a heartbeat, she almost believed him, almost saw something human behind those cold eyes. Then she remembered the photograph of Mason, the threats, the years of cruelty. "Goodbye, Richard." She walked out without looking back. The drive home was silent. Elena stared out the window, Richard's words echoing in her head. Someone else tampered with that car. Thomas Green. It couldn't be true. It was just another manipulation, another attempt to destabilize her, to make her doubt everything she had worked so hard to prove. "But what if it wasn't?" "You're quiet," Sarah said. "I'm thinking." "About what Richard said, about whether any of it could be true." Sarah was quiet for a moment. "There's one way to find out." "How?" "The accident reconstruction report, the autopsy. If someone else really did tamper with Daniel's car, there might be evidence." Elena nodded slowly. "Can you get access to those files?" "I know people who can. It might take a few days." "Do it." When they arrived back at Blackwood Manor, Mason was waiting on the front steps. Mama! He ran to her, throwing his arms around her waist. You were gone forever. Where did you go? Elena held him tightly, breathing in the scent of his hair. I had to take care of some business, sweetheart. Nothing you need to worry about. Was it about the bad man? Elena hesitated. She had promised herself she would never lie to her children, but some truths were too heavy for 8-year-old shoulders. Yes, she said finally. But it's handled now. Everything is okay. Mason looked up at her with Daniel's eyes. You promise? I promise. But even as she said it, she wondered if it was true. The files arrived 3 days later. Elena sat in her office with the door locked, spreading the documents across her desk. The accident reconstruction report, the autopsy findings, the police investigation notes. She read everything twice, then 3 times, and then she saw it. The original brake failure analysis showed a single cut, clean and deliberate. Richard's work. But there was a second report conducted after the trial that noted something the first investigators had missed. A second point of damage. Not a cut, a puncture. Small, almost invisible, easily overlooked unless you knew exactly what you were looking for. Someone had tampered with the brake fluid reservoir, drained it just enough that the system would fail completely under pressure. Richard's cut would have caused a slow leak. The puncture would have caused immediate failure. 2 people had tried to kill Daniel, and only one of them was in prison. Elena's hands were shaking as she picked up her phone. Sarah, I need you to find everything you can about Thomas Green. Everything. His finances, his clients, his connections. Elena, what's going on? Richard wasn't lying. Someone else killed Daniel, and I think I know who. The investigation took 2 weeks. Sarah worked around the clock, pulling records, making calls, calling in favors from contacts she had built over 30 years in heritage management. Elena barely slept, going through every piece of information as it came in. What they found was damning. Thomas Green had been the Hartwell family attorney since 1978. He had handled the estate planning for 3 generations, managing trusts worth hundreds of millions of dollars. His fee structure was unusual. Instead of billing by the hour, he took a percentage of the assets under management. A small percentage, but applied to such massive wealth, it added up to millions every year. But that wasn't the most disturbing part. The most disturbing part was the pattern. Every time a Hartwell family member had died unexpectedly over the past 40 years, their estate had been restructured in ways that benefited Green's firm. Policies were rewritten, trusts were consolidated, and somehow Green always ended up with more control, more access, more money. Harold Hartwell. Daniel's father? 2 uncles? A great-aunt? 5 deaths in 4 decades. All ruled accidents or natural causes. All benefiting Thomas Green. My God, Sarah whispered when they laid it all out. He's been stealing from this family for decades. Not just stealing. Elena's voice was cold. Killing. We need to go to the police. We need more than circumstantial evidence. We need proof. How do we get that? Elena thought about it. Green was a lawyer, a careful one. He wouldn't have left obvious trails. Whatever evidence existed would be hidden, protected, buried under layers of legal complexity. But there was one person who might know where to look. Marcus, she said. Marcus Hartwell was released from prison 6 months early for good behavior. Elena met him at the gate on a cold December morning. He looked older, thinner, his eyes haunted by everything he had seen and done. Thank you for coming, he said. I need your help. His face fell. I thought maybe you were here because... Because what? Because you wanted to see me. Because we were starting to be something like friends. Elena's expression softened. We are friends, Marcus, but right now I need your help more than your friendship. She told him everything. The second puncture, the pattern of deaths, Thomas Green. Marcus listened in silence, his face growing paler with every word. Green, he said finally, that son of a bitch. You knew him. He handled everything for the family, trust estates, investments. He was always there, always watching, always advising. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. I never liked him. There was something wrong about him, but Richard trusted him completely. Because Richard didn't know Green was playing his own game. What do you need from me? Access, information, anything you know about Green's operations, his clients, his methods. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he nodded. There's a storage facility in Richmond. Green keeps files there, client records going back decades. I went there once with Richard to retrieve some documents. He paused. I still remember the access code. Elena's heart raced. Can you get us in? I can try. They went that night. The storage facility was in an industrial part of Richmond surrounded by warehouses and empty lots. Elena and Marcus approached on foot, leaving Sarah in the car with the engine running. "Unit 247, Marcus whispered. "Third floor." They slipped inside through a side door and made their way up the stairs. The facility was quiet, the only sound the hum of fluorescent lights and the distant rumble of trucks on the highway. Unit 247 was at the end of a long corridor. Marcus punched in the code and the door clicked open. Inside were boxes. Hundreds of boxes stacked floor to ceiling, each one labeled with a client name and date. "Where do we start?" Elena asked. "Look for anything marked Hartwell or Blackwood." They worked quickly, pulling boxes and rifling through files. Legal documents, financial statements, correspondence going back decades. And then Elena found it. A box marked DH 2019, Daniel's initials, the year before he died. Inside were files she had never seen before. Emails between Green and someone using an encrypted address, bank transfers to offshore accounts, and most damning of all, a detailed timeline of Daniel's movements in the weeks before his death. Green had been tracking her husband, recording his activities, planning his murder. "Elena," Marcus's voice was urgent. "We need to go now." She shoved the files into her bag and ran. They made it to the car just as headlights appeared at the entrance to the facility. Someone was coming, someone who had been alerted to their presence. "Drive," Elena said. Sarah floored the accelerator. They were 3 blocks away when Elena's phone rang. Unknown number. She answered it. "Mrs. Hartwell." The voice was calm, cultured, familiar. "I believe you have something that belongs to me. Thomas Green." Elena's blood ran cold. "How did you get this number?" "I've been watching you for a long time. Since before your husband died. Since before you knew Blackwood Manor existed." His voice hardened. "You should have taken the money and left Mrs. Hartwell. You should have sold that shack and gone back to California and forgotten any of this ever happened. You killed Daniel." "I protected my interests. There's a difference." "There's no difference. You're a murderer. And you're a problem." Green paused. "But problems can be solved. They always are." The line went dead. Elena stared at the phone, her heart pounding. Green was coming for her, and this time she wasn't sure she could stop him. They went straight to Agent Rodriguez. Elena spread the stolen files across his desk, explaining everything. The second puncture, the pattern of deaths. Green's surveillance of Daniel. Rodriguez listened with growing alarm. "This is serious," he said. "Very serious." "Can you arrest him?" "Not yet. These files were obtained illegally. We can't use them as evidence." "Then what can we do?" Rodriguez was quiet for a moment. "We set a trap. Get Green to incriminate himself. On record." "How?" "You meet with him, wearing a wire." Elena's stomach dropped. "Me?" "You're the only one he'll talk to. The only one he considers a threat worth addressing personally." "He'll kill me." "Not if we do this right. We'll have agents everywhere. The moment he says anything incriminating, we move in." Elena looked at Sarah, at Marcus, at the files that proved Thomas Green had been destroying families for 40 years. "When?" she asked. "Tomorrow night. We'll arrange a meeting, somewhere public, somewhere we can control. And if something goes wrong," Rodriguez's expression was grim, "then we make sure nothing goes wrong." The meeting was set for the following evening at a restaurant in downtown Richmond. Elena arrived at 7 o'clock wearing a wire hidden beneath her blouse. Agent Rodriguez and his team were positioned throughout the restaurant disguised as waiters, customers, kitchen staff. Green was already there when she walked in. He looked exactly as she remembered from the phone call about the inheritance. Silver hair, expensive suit, the smooth confidence of a man who had spent his life manipulating others. "Mrs. Hartwell." He stood and extended his hand. "Thank you for meeting me." Elena didn't take it. "Let's skip the pleasantries." She sat down across from him. "I understand you've been doing some research," Green said. "Impressive work, truly." "I found the files. I know what you did to Daniel." Green's expression didn't change. "You found some papers in a storage unit, papers that were obtained illegally and will never be admissible in any court." "I know about the other deaths, too. Harold, Daniel's father, the pattern." A flicker of something crossed Green's face. Surprise, concern. "You've been busy." "I want to know why. Why Daniel?" "Why any of them?" Green leaned back in his chair. "Because they were getting too close to the truth. Because they threatened the arrangements I had spent decades building." His voice was calm, matter-of-fact. The Hartwell fortune was my life's work, Mrs. Hartwell. I managed it. I grew it. I protected it. And I wasn't going to let anyone take that away. So you killed them. I removed obstacles. There's a difference. There's no difference. Elena's voice shook with rage. You murdered my husband. You orphaned my children. You destroyed our family. I protected my interests. Green's smile was cold. Just as I'm going to protect them now. He reached into his jacket. Elena's heart stopped. Gun? Someone shouted. But Green wasn't reaching for a weapon. He was reaching for a phone. Did you really think I wouldn't know you were wearing a wire? He pressed a button and suddenly the lights in the restaurant went out. Emergency alarms blared. People screamed. In the chaos, Green grabbed Elena's arm. You're coming with me. Let go of me. You should have taken the money, Mrs. Hartwell. Now it's too late. He dragged her toward the back of the restaurant, toward a door she hadn't noticed before. Elena struggled, but Green was stronger than he looked. Decades of survival had hardened him in ways that didn't show on the surface. They burst through the door into an alley. A car was waiting, engine running. Get in, Green ordered. No. He pulled a gun from his jacket. Get in. Elena looked at the weapon, then at Green's face. There was no hesitation in his eyes. No doubt. He would kill her right here if she didn't comply. She got in the car. Green slid in beside her, the gun pressed against her ribs. Drive, he told the man behind the wheel. The car pulled away, leaving the chaos of the restaurant behind. Elena's mind raced. The wire was still working. Rodriguez could track her. Help was coming. But would it come in time? Where are we going? She asked. Somewhere quiet. Somewhere we can finish our conversation without interruption. The FBI knows what you did. They have the files. Even if you kill me, it's over. The files prove nothing without corroboration, and the only person who can corroborate them is about to disappear. They'll find me. Green smiled. They'll find a body, eventually, but by then I'll be long gone. The car wound through dark streets heading out of the city. Elena watched the buildings give way to trees, to farmland, to the kind of empty darkness where anything could happen. You're making a mistake, she said. I don't make mistakes. That's how I've survived this long. You made a mistake with Daniel. You didn't count on him leaving evidence behind. Green's jaw tightened. Your husband was clever, I'll give him that. But cleverness isn't enough. It never is. It was enough to put Richard in prison. Richard was a fool. He let emotion cloud his judgment. I don't have that weakness. The car turned onto a dirt road bumping over ruts and stones. In the distance, Elena could see a structure, an old farmhouse abandoned and dark. This was where he would kill her. This was where she would die, unless she did something. Stop the car, Green ordered. The driver obeyed. Green opened his door and pulled Elena out, keeping the gun pressed against her back. Walk, he said. She walked, toward the farmhouse, toward death. And then she heard it. Helicopters. Green spun around. On his eyes scanning the sky. Red and blue lights appeared on the horizon, police cars racing toward them. No, he whispered. That's impossible. They tracked the car, Elena said. They've been following us the whole time. Green's face twisted with rage. He raised the gun, pointed it at Elena's head. If I'm going down, you're coming with me. Elena closed her eyes. A gunshot, but not from Green's weapon. She opened her eyes to see Green crumpling to the ground. Blood spreading across his expensive suit. Behind him, Agent Rodriguez lowered his weapon. Mrs. Hartwell. His voice was calm, professional. Are you hurt? Elena looked at Green's body. At the man who had killed her husband. At the monster who had destroyed so many lives. No, she said. I'm not hurt. For the first time in a long time, it was actually true. The paramedics arrived 20 minutes later. Green was pronounced dead at the scene. The investigation that followed would uncover the full scope of his crimes: 5 murders over 4 decades, millions stolen from the families he was supposed to protect. Elena sat in the back of an ambulance, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, watching the chaos unfold. Sarah appeared at her side. It's over, she said. Really over this time. Elena nodded slowly. Daniel can rest now. They all can. And you. Elena thought about it. About the journey that had brought her here. About the $2 shack and the secret vault and the truth she had fought so hard to uncover. I can rest too, she said finally. Now I can finally rest. But rest, she was learning, didn't mean stopping. It meant finding peace in the midst of everything. And for the first time since Daniel's death, she felt the peace settling over her like a warm embrace. The nightmare was over. The healing could finally begin. The aftermath and healing. Building the new legacy, the foundation, children growing up. Final resolution and peace. I'll craft a powerful, resonant conclusion that captures the emotional journey and provides a sense of ultimate triumph and hope. Part 5. 5 years had transformed everything. Elena stood at the window of her private study watching the morning sun paint the Virginia hills in shades of gold. Below her, the grounds of Blackwood Manor buzzed with activity. School buses lined the parking lot. Families walked the garden paths. Tour guides led groups through the historic halls. This was what she had built. This was what Daniel had died for. A knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. "Mom?" Mason's voice, deeper now at 13, called through the wood. "You wanted to see me." "Come in, sweetheart." He entered, and Elena's heart swelled at the sight of him. Tall for his age, with Daniel's dark eyes and her stubborn chin. He carried himself with a confidence that hadn't existed 5 years ago when he was just a frightened boy clutching her coat in front of a rotting shack. "The Cambridge letter came," he said, holding up an envelope Elena's breath caught. "And I got in." A smile spread across his face. "Full scholarship to their summer history program." She crossed the room in 3 steps and pulled him into a hug. "Mason, that's incredible. I'm so proud of you. Dad would be proud too, right? Your father would be over the moon." She pulled back to look at him. "He always knew you were special?" Mason's expression flickered. Even after 5 years, the mention of Daniel could shift the air in a room. "I wish he could see this place," Mason said quietly. "See what you've done with it." "He sees it. I believe that. Wherever he is, he's watching." The door burst open, and Lily came running in, all 5-year-old energy and flying pigtails. "Mama, Mama, Mr. Thomas said I can help with the tour today. Can I please?" Elena laughed, scooping her daughter into her arms. "You want to be a tour guide?" "I know everything about the castle. I can tell people about the secret stairs and the treasure room and the ravens." "It's not really a treasure room, Lily." "It had treasure in it. That's what makes it a treasure room." Mason ruffled his sister's hair. "She's got a point, Mom." Elena looked at her children, her miracles, the reason she had fought so hard for so long. "Okay," she said, "but you have to stay with Mr. Thomas the whole time. No running off." "I promise, cross my heart." Lily wriggled free and raced out of the room, her laughter echoing down the hallway. Mason watched her go with a soft smile. "She doesn't remember, does she? What it was like before. She was too young. Maybe that's a blessing. Maybe," Elena touched her son's face, "but you remember, and I need you to know something." "What?" "Everything that happened, everything we went through, it made us who we are. The struggle wasn't wasted. The pain wasn't pointless." Her voice caught. "Your father's death led us here. To this moment. To this life. And I will never ever let you forget what he sacrificed." Mason's eyes glistened. "I won't forget? I promise." They stood together in silence for a moment, mother and son bound by grief and love and the unbreakable bonds of family. Then Mason straightened. "The foundation meeting's in an hour. Sarah said you need to review the scholarship applications before then." "How many this year?" "Over 300. Elena's heart swelled. 300 children who had lost parents. 300 families struggling just like she had once struggled. 300 chances to make a difference. "Let's get to work," she said. The Daniel Hartwell Memorial Foundation had become her life's mission. In 5 years, it had provided scholarships to over 500 children, full rides to college, grief counseling, summer camps, after-school programs. Everything Elena had wished she'd had when she was growing up alone in the foster system. The applications came from all over the country. Some were heartbreaking. Children who had lost parents to illness, to accidents, to violence. Each story a reminder of how quickly life could shatter. Elena read every single one. She remembered what it felt like to be alone, to have no one fighting for you, to believe that your future was limited by your past. She never wanted another child to feel that way. "This one," she said, sliding a file across the table to Sarah. "Marcus Thompson. Lost his father in a car accident last year. Mother working 3 jobs. Straight-A student. Wants to be a doctor." Sarah reviewed the file. "He reminds me of someone. He reminds me of Mason. Of what Mason might have become if things had gone differently." "We can only fund 50 new scholarships this year, Elena. There are 300 applications." "Then we need more money." "The endowment is already substantial. We're funding more programs than any similar foundation in the country. It's not enough. Elena's voice was fierce. It will never be enough. Not as long as there are children out there who need help. Sarah leaned back in her chair. You're going to burn yourself out. I'm going to do what Daniel would have wanted, what Daniel died for. Elena met her friend's eyes. These children are his legacy. Every kid we help, every family we support, that's Daniel's spirit living on. I won't stop. I can't stop. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, then she nodded. There's something you should know, she said, about the estate revenues. What about them? They've tripled since you took over. Tours, events, the vineyard, the gift shop. Blackwood Manor is now the most visited historic site in Virginia. Elena hadn't known that. She had been so focused on the foundation, on her children, on the day-to-day work of managing an estate worth $85 million that she had lost track of the bigger picture. What does that mean? She asked. It means we can fund 100 new scholarships this year, maybe more if we restructure the endowment. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. 100? You built something remarkable here, Elena, something that will outlast all of us. Sarah smiled. Daniel would be so proud. The words hit Elena like a wave. She had been so busy fighting, so consumed with survival and justice and building something meaningful that she had forgotten to stop and appreciate how far they had come. From a $2 shack to an $85 million estate. From a widow with nothing to a woman who changed lives. From despair to hope. Thank you, Sarah, she whispered, for everything, from the very beginning. You're the one who did the hard work. I just helped where I could. You believed in me when no one else did. When I was just a stranger who walked in with unbelievable claims and documents that seemed too good to be true. Elena reached across the table and squeezed her friend's hand. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Yes, you could have. Sarah's voice was firm. That's what you still don't understand, Elena. You have a strength inside you that most people never find, a determination that doesn't quit. That's not something I gave you. That's something you've always had. The foundation meeting ran for 3 hours. By the end, they had selected 112 new scholarship recipients. Elena read each name aloud, committing them to memory. These were her children now, in a way. Her responsibility. Her legacy. After the meeting, she walked to the restored gatehouse. It stood exactly where it always had, at the edge of the property line overlooking the valley. But it no longer looked like the rotting shack she had first encountered. The roof had been replaced. The windows gleamed with new glass. The porch was solid and freshly painted. Inside, the famous floorboards were now covered with glass, allowing visitors to peer down into the vault below. The documents themselves had been moved to a climate-controlled archive, but replicas were on display telling the story of how a $2 inheritance had unlocked an $85 million legacy. Elena descended the stairs one more time. The vault looked different now, clean, lit, preserved. But the raven emblem still watched from the walls. The shield still hung above the sealed doorway, and in the center where the chest had once stood there was a simple bronze plaque. In memory of Daniel James Hartwell, 1985-2020, who loved truth more than safety and gave his life to protect his family. Elena knelt before the plaque and pressed her hand against the cold metal. I did it, she whispered. Everything you asked. The children are safe. The truth is known. The foundation is helping kids just like you would have wanted. The silence that answered her was not empty. It was full of memories, full of love, full of the presence of someone who would never truly be gone as long as she remembered him. Mason got into Cambridge, she continued. Can you believe it? Our boy is going to study at one of the most prestigious universities in the world. And Lily, oh Daniel, you should see her. She's so full of life, so curious, so brave. She reminds me of you sometimes. A tear slid down her cheek. I miss you every day, every single day. But I'm okay now. We're all okay. She stood, wiped her eyes, and climbed back up the stairs into the light. The annual Blackwood Heritage Festival was the following week. It had become the biggest event of the year, drawing thousands of visitors from across the country. Historical reenactments, traditional music, food vendors, craft demonstrations, and at the center of it all, the story of how a widow and her children had reclaimed their birthright. Elena hated the attention, but she understood its purpose. Every visitor who came to the festival, every dollar they spent went to support the foundation. The children came first. Always. This year, the festival was larger than ever. A documentary crew had been filming for months, capturing the transformation of Blackwood Manor from disputed property to thriving community center. A book deal was in the works. Talk show hosts had been calling for interviews. Elena had refused them all. "I'm not interested in fame," she told Sarah when her friend tried to convince her otherwise. "I'm interested in impact." "But your story could inspire millions of people." "Then let the story speak for itself. I don't need to be on television." "You're the most stubborn person I've ever met." "I know," Elena smiled. "It's my best quality." The festival opened at 10 in the morning. By noon, the grounds were packed. Elena moved through the crowds, greeting visitors, thanking volunteers, watching her children play with an ease that still felt like a miracle. Mason was giving tours to younger kids, showing them the secret staircase in the gatehouse, telling them stories about hidden treasure and family secrets. He had grown into a natural storyteller with his father's charisma and his mother's determination. Lily was everywhere at once, running from booth to booth, tasting food, watching demonstrations, asking questions that made adults laugh and think in equal measure. "Your daughter is something else," the head chef told Elena after Lily peppered him with questions about medieval cooking techniques. "She's her father's child," Elena replied. "And yours. She has your fire." Elena watched Lily race off toward the archery demonstration, her pigtails flying. Yes, she had fire. They both did. A commotion near the main entrance caught Elena's attention. A crowd was gathering around someone. Cameras flashed. Voices rose in excitement. Elena pushed her way through her security training, kicking in. Something was wrong. Someone was here who shouldn't be. And then she saw him. Marcus Hartwell stood at the edge of the crowd, looking uncertain and out of place. He was thinner than she remembered his face, lined with the years he had spent in prison and the harder years that had followed. Their eyes met across the distance. Elena's heart clenched. She hadn't seen Marcus since his release. He had moved to Montana, started over, tried to build a life far from the wreckage of his family. His daughters visited Blackwood Manor, sometimes brought by their mother, but Marcus had stayed away. Until now. Elena crossed the distance between them. "Marcus." "Elena." His voice was rough, uncertain. "I hope it's okay that I came. I should have called first, but I wasn't sure if you would answer." "You're always welcome here. I told you that." "I know, but..." He trailed off, looking around at the festival, at the crowds, at the transformation that had taken place since he'd last been here. "You've built something incredible." "We built it, all of us who fought to uncover the truth." "I didn't do much. I was a coward for most of my life." "You came through when it mattered. That counts for something." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "I need to tell you something. That's why I came." Elena's stomach tightened. After everything that had happened, she had learned to be wary of surprises. "What is it?" "Richard is dying." The words hit her like a physical blow. "What?" "Cancer, stage 4. The prison doctors say he has maybe 3 months left." Elena didn't know what to feel. Richard had murdered her husband, tried to destroy her family, spent his entire life hurting people for profit, and now he was dying. "He wants to see you," Marcus continued. "One last time. He says he has something to tell you. Something he should have told you years ago." "I don't care what he has to say." "I know, I told him you wouldn't come, but he made me promise to ask." Marcus's eyes were pleading. "Elena, I've spent the last 5 years trying to make up for what my family did. I've testified against Richard, against Green. I've cooperated with every investigation, but there's one thing I could never give you." "What?" "Closure. Real closure. Not just justice, but understanding." He paused. "Richard knows things about Daniel, about why things happened the way they did. Things that might help you finally put the past to rest." Elena wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Marcus to leave and never come back, wanted to pretend that Richard didn't exist, that he was already dead, that his name meant nothing to her anymore. But she couldn't, because even after 5 years, there were still questions, still gaps in the story, still moments that didn't quite make sense. And if Richard was really dying, this might be her last chance to get answers. "When come?" she asked. "Tomorrow. The prison chaplain arranged everything." Elena looked back at the festival, at Mason giving tours, at Lily laughing at the archery range, at Sarah coordinating volunteers, at the life she had built from the ashes of destruction. She had moved on. She had healed. She had found peace. Did she really want to risk all of that for one more conversation with the man who had taken everything from her? "I'll think about it," she said. She didn't sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Richard's face, his cold smile, his arrogant certainty that he would always win. She saw Daniel, too. His warmth, his kindness, his belief that truth would eventually prevail. and she saw herself standing at a crossroads trying to decide which path to take. At 3 in the morning, she gave up on sleep and went to Daniel's grave. It was in the family cemetery on the manor grounds, a simple headstone beneath an ancient oak tree. She had visited hundreds of times over the years, talking to him, asking for guidance, sharing the joys and sorrows of their children's lives. Tonight, she needed him more than ever. "What should I do?" she whispered into the darkness. "He's dying. He wants to see me. Part of me hopes he suffers. Part of me wants to hear what he has to say." She sank to her knees on the cold ground. "Help me, Daniel. Tell me what's right." The wind stirred through the leaves overhead, and suddenly Elena knew. She had spent 5 years running from the past, fighting it, trying to bury it beneath layers of work and achievement and purpose. But the past was still there, still haunting her, still holding her hostage in ways she couldn't fully understand. If she wanted to be truly free, she had to face it. All of it. One last time. The prison was exactly as she remembered. Gray. Cold. Oppressive. The same guards, the same procedures, the same suffocating sense of despair. But this time, she wasn't afraid. She walked through the security checkpoints with her head held high. She submitted to the searches without complaint. She followed the guards through endless corridors until they reached the medical wing. Richard was in a bed near the window. He looked nothing like the man she remembered. His face was gaunt, his eyes sunken, his body wasted by the disease that was consuming him from within. Tubes and wires connected him to machines that beeped and whirred in the antiseptic silence. "Elena." His voice was a whisper. "You came." "I almost didn't." "But you did. That's what matters." He struggled to sit up. "I don't have much time. The doctors say a few weeks, maybe less." "What do you want, Richard?" He was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer, almost human. "I want to apologize." Elena stared at him. "What?" "I want to apologize. For Daniel. For the way I treated you. For everything I did that hurt you and your children." He met her eyes. "I know it doesn't change anything. I know you have every right to hate me. But I needed to say it. Before I die. I needed you to know that I'm sorry." Elena didn't know how to respond. She had imagined this conversation 1,000 times over the years. She had imagined screaming at Richard, cursing him, telling him exactly what she thought of him and everything he had done. She had never imagined this. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you sorry now?" After everything, Richard closed his eyes. "Because I was wrong. About everything. I spent my whole life chasing money, power, status. I thought that was what mattered. I thought that was what would make me happy." He opened his eyes again, and for the first time, Elena saw tears there. "But it didn't. It never did. I destroyed my family. I killed my own brother. And for what? An estate I can't take with me, a fortune I'll never spend. You knew what you were doing. You chose it. I know, and I have to live with that. Die with it, I mean." He reached out his hand, trembling. "I'm not asking for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm just asking you to understand." "Understand what?" "That I wasn't born a monster. I became one. Through choices, through compromises, through telling myself that the ends justified the means." He pulled his hand back. "You're different, Elena. You faced the same temptations I did, the same opportunities to become something dark, and you chose the light. You built something beautiful instead of destroying everything around you." "I had my children to think about." "So did I. My daughters, but I never thought about them. Not really. I thought about myself." Richard's voice cracked. "Promise me something." "I'm not promising you anything." "Promise me you'll tell your children the truth, all of it. Not just the heroic parts, but the dark parts too. The parts where I was human before I became a monster." He took a shaking breath. "I don't want to be remembered only as a villain. I want them to know that there was a time when I could have been different. When any of us could have been different." Elena looked at the dying man before her. She thought about the hatred she had carried for years, the rage, the desire for vengeance, and she realized with stunning clarity that she didn't want to carry it anymore. "I'll tell them the truth," she said. "All of it, the good and the bad." Richard's eyes closed with relief. "Thank you." "Don't thank me. I'm not doing it for you. I'm doing it for them. So they understand that life is complicated, that people are complicated, that even the worst choices start with small compromises. That's more than I deserve." "Yes, it is." She stood up. There was nothing more to say, nothing more she needed from him. But at the door, she paused. "Richard?" "Yes." Daniel forgave you before he died. He told me once that he pitied you more than he hated you. He said you were trapped in a prison of your own making long before you ended up in a real one." Richard's face crumpled. A sob escaped his lips. "He was always the better man," he whispered. "The best of us. I knew it, and I hated him for it, and I destroyed him because of it." "Yes, you did." Elena's voice was quiet but firm. "But destroying him didn't make you better. It just made you alone." She walked out without looking back. The drive home took 3 hours. Elena spent most of it crying. Not for Richard, not even for Daniel, but for herself. For the woman she had been, for the journey she had taken, for the life she had built from the ruins of everything she had lost. When she arrived at Blackwood Manor, Sarah was waiting on the front steps. "How did it go?" He apologized. "Did you accept?" Elena thought about it. "I don't know, but I think I understood him. For the first time, I saw who he was underneath all the cruelty and greed." "And who was that?" "A scared little boy who never learned how to love, who thought power was the same as happiness, who destroyed everything he touched because he didn't know how to build." Elena wiped her eyes. "I feel sorry for him. Is that strange?" "No, it's human." Sarah put her arm around her friend. "It's the most human thing you could feel." The news of Richard's death came 3 weeks later. Elena received the call while she was reviewing scholarship applications in her office. The prison chaplain spoke in measured tones, explaining that Richard had passed peacefully in his sleep. No final words, no dramatic last moments, just a quiet ending to a violent life. She hung up the phone and sat in silence for a long time. Then she went to find her children. Mason was in the library studying for his Cambridge exams. Lily was in the garden, playing with the flowers. She gathered them both and sat them down in the family room. "I have something to tell you," she said. "Your Uncle Richard died this morning." Mason's face was unreadable. "How do you feel about that?" "I don't know yet. Sad, maybe. Relieved. Confused." Elena took their hands. "I went to see him before he died. He apologized for what he did to your father. To all of us." "Did you forgive him?" Lily asked. "I'm working on it. Forgiveness is hard, sweetheart. It's not something that happens all at once. It's something you practice over and over until one day you realize you're not carrying the anger anymore." "Is that what Dad would have wanted?" Mason asked. "Yes, your father believed in second chances, in redemption, in the possibility that people could change." Elena squeezed their hands. "He would want us to remember Richard not just as the man who hurt us, but as someone who lost his way, who made terrible choices, but was still human underneath." "That's hard," Mason said. "The hard things usually are the most important." Elena pulled them both close. "But we don't have to do it alone. We have each other. We always will." The years continued to pass. Mason went to Cambridge and graduated with honors. He returned to Blackwood Manor with a doctorate in medieval history and a passion for preserving the past. At 23, he became the youngest director of the estate's educational programs, teaching thousands of students about their shared heritage. Lily grew into a fierce young woman with her mother's determination and her father's charm. She studied law, specializing in cases involving elder abuse and family fraud. Every case she won was a tribute to the children who had been failed by systems designed to protect them. The Daniel Hartwell Memorial Foundation expanded beyond anyone's expectations. Over 1,000 scholarships, 50 partner organizations, programs in all 50 states. A legacy that touched millions of lives. Elena watched it all from the window of her study, marveling at how far they had come. Marcus visited every few months, bringing his daughters. They had become part of the extended family, the cousins that Mason and Lily never expected to have. The sins of the fathers did not have to be inherited by the children. That was something Elena had learned the hard way. On the 10th anniversary of Daniel's death, the family gathered at his grave. Elena, Mason, Lily, Sarah, Marcus, and his daughters. Even some of the foundation scholars who had asked to pay their respects to the man whose legacy had changed their lives. Mason spoke first. "Dad, I wish you could see what Mom built in your name. The foundation, the programs, the thousands of kids who got a chance because of you." His voice cracked. "I try to live up to your example every day. I hope I'm making you proud." Lily went next. "Hi, Daddy. I know I don't remember you, but Mom tells me stories. She says I have your smile and your curiosity and your brave heart." She placed a flower on the grave. "I'm going to be a lawyer, just like I told you I would. I'm going to help people who can't help themselves. That's what you would have wanted, right? Then it was Elena's turn. She stood before the grave looking at the name carved in stone. 10 years. It felt like yesterday. It felt like a lifetime. "Daniel," she said softly, "I don't know if you can hear me. I don't know if any of this makes sense from wherever you are, but I need you to know that we're okay. Better than okay. We're thriving." She took a deep breath. "You gave me the map, but I had to walk the path. And it was hard. The hardest thing I've ever done? There were moments when I wanted to give up. Moments when the weight of everything we lost seemed too heavy to bear." Tears streamed down her face. "But I didn't give up. Because every time I wanted to quit, I thought about you. About your faith in me. About the letter you left in that vault, trusting me to finish what you started." She pressed her hand against the cold stone. "I finished it, Daniel. I gave our children the life you dreamed of. And I built something that will last long after we're all gone. Something that will help children for generations to come." Her voice strengthened. "You were right about me, about everything. I was stronger than I knew, braver than I believed, and more stubborn than anyone had the right to be." A small laugh escaped her lips. "Thank you for believing in me. Thank you for loving me. Thank you for leaving me that $2 shack with its impossible secret and its unbelievable truth." She stepped back, looking at her family gathered around her. "I used to think the shack was a curse, a cruel joke designed to humiliate me, but now I understand. It was a gift, the greatest gift anyone has ever given me." She smiled through her tears. It was the gift of purpose, of meaning, of a second chance to build something beautiful from the ruins of tragedy. Mason put his arm around her. Lily took her hand. Sarah stood beside her like the friend she had always been. And in that moment, surrounded by the people she loved, Elena finally understood what Daniel had known all along. The value of something isn't determined by what it costs, it's determined by what you're willing to do with it. $2 had changed everything. A rotting shack had become a palace. A broken widow had become a force for good. And a cruel joke had become the foundation of a legacy that would never die. Elena looked up at the sky, at the clouds drifting overhead, at the future stretching endlessly before them. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the pain and the triumph, the loss and the love, the darkness and the light that had followed. She thought about Daniel watching from somewhere beyond the veil, and she smiled. Because this was not a story about inheritance. This was not a story about money or mansions or the cruelty of people who had everything and wanted more. This was a story about a mother who refused to break. A story about children who deserved better and finally received it. A story about truth that could not be buried no matter how hard some tried. And as Elena stood there with her family surrounded by the legacy they had built together, she knew one thing with absolute certainty. The Hartwells had laughed when they gave her that $2 house. They had expected her to fail. They had expected her to crawl back to California with nothing. They had been wrong. Because Elena Hartwell was not a woman who failed. She was not a woman who quit. She was a woman who turned $2 into 85 million. A woman who turned tragedy into purpose. A woman who turned a cruel joke into a legacy that would outlast them all. And as she walked away from Daniel's grave, holding her children's hands, heading back toward the mansion that had become their home, she knew that the story was complete. Not because there were no more challenges ahead, not because life would suddenly become easy, but because she had finally become the woman Daniel had always believed she could be. Strong, brave, unstoppable. The sun set over Blackwood Manor, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And Elena Hartwell, the woman who had inherited a $2 shack and turned it into an empire, walked into the light with her head held high. She had won. Not just the money, not just the estate, but the only victory that truly mattered. She had won the life her family deserved,